The sun of Terran hung high in the yellow sky, casting sharp light across the desert world. The heat made the air shimmer above the endless sands, and in the center of the city of Kirith, the grand arena stood like a giant crown of stone. It was the day of the Trials of Strength, an event that happened once every 10 cycles. Warriors from every corner of known space had gathered, their banners fluttering in the hot wind. The crowd had already filled the stone stands, voices echoing in excitement. Inside the waiting hall, champions prepared for battle. Some tightened the straps of heavy armor. Others sharpened weapons that glimmered in the light. The scent of oil, metal, and dust filled the air. The hall was alive with energy. But one figure stood apart from the noise. A human named Raylan leaned against the wall, his hands resting calmly at his sides. He wore no heavy armor, only a simple suit of light protective cloth compared to the alien warriors. He seemed small and unimpressive. Most who passed him gave him no more than a glance, but some laughed openly. To the people of Terran, humans were fragile beings, built for soft worlds and gentle climates. Here in the arena, where strength meant towering size and crushing force, a human challenger looked out of place, yet Raylan's eyes were steady, watching. The others without fear. From the far side of the hall, a shadow moved. A tall warrior woman entered, her skin a pale bronze, her hair bound in a braid that reached her waist. Her name was Varel, and she was known across the outer worlds for her victories. At her side walked her war beast, Korth. The creature was as tall as 2 men, its massive frame covered in thick, dark armor plates that reflected the torchlight. Each step it took shook the floor. The other warriors stepped back to give them space. Varel noticed Raylan standing alone. Her sharp eyes studied him for a moment before she spoke. "You are the human challenger," she said, her voice carrying both curiosity and amusement. "I thought the stories were lies, but here you are. Do you truly believe you can fight here?" Raylan met her gaze. "I came for the trial," he answered simply. Varel smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "Then you will face Korth. He has crushed champions twice your size. Do you think your soft bones will last even a moment?" Her words drew laughter from nearby warriors. Raylan did not reply. He simply adjusted his stance and looked at the beast, Korth's small, sharp eyes glimmered as it lowered its head and let out a low, rumbling growl. The sound echoed through the hall like distant thunder. Moments later, the deep tone of the arena horn filled the air. The trial was about to begin. Warriors and beasts moved toward the great gates that opened into the arena floor. Raylan walked at the back, his steps slow and steady. The crowd's voices grew louder as he entered the sunlight. Thousands of faces looked down from the stands, banners waving in the wind. The arena floor was a wide circle of sand, surrounded by high stone walls. In the center stood 2 tall banners, one marked with the emblem of Varel's clan, the other left plain for Raylan. The heat of the day made the sand warm underfoot, and the air carried the smell of dust and distant spices from the city. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "This match will decide the fate of challengers from distant worlds. On one side, the undefeated champion of the trials, Varel of the Iron Horn clan, with her war beast, Korth. On the other side, the human newcomer, Raylan of Earth." The crowd cheered for Varel, chanting her name. Raylan's name was barely heard, swallowed by the noise. Some shouted words of doubt, while others laughed openly at the sight of him. Varel walked to her place with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. Korth stood beside her, claws digging into the sand. Raylan stepped to his mark. He looked across the arena at his opponent, his expression unreadable. The announcer raised his hand, and the signal flag dropped. The match had begun. Korth's roar shook the air as it lunged forward, its armored legs kicking up sand. The creature's shadow fell over Raylan, who moved aside with quick precision. The crowd gasped at his speed. Korth spun, its heavy tail sweeping across the sand. But Raylan stayed out of reach, his movements light and measured. Varel frowned slightly. She had expected him to fall instantly, but instead, he moved like water flowing around stone. Still, she believed it would only be a matter of time before Korth crushed him. The creature charged again, and the sound of its claws striking the sand echoed like drums. Raylan's eyes stayed on the beast, studying its rhythm. Every step, every swing of its massive claws left traces in the sand. The crowd's cheers grew louder as the clash continued, the sound mixing with the heat and the dust swirling in the air. For Raylan, this was not just a fight, it was a test of patience. He knew that power alone did not win battles. Timing, knowledge, and calm could turn the tide. And as the first minutes of the match passed, he began to see the patterns that would guide his next move. The first round of the trial was not over yet, but the air in the arena had already changed. The laughter from earlier was fading. Some in the crowd leaned forward, curious to see what this fragile human would do next. And in that moment, under the burning sun of Terran, the seeds of a different kind of victory began to take root. The heat pressed down on the arena like a heavy blanket, but the crowd's excitement kept their voices strong. Varel stood tall at her mark, her eyes fixed on the human who faced her. Raylan's calm expression made her frown. She had seen challengers tremble before the trial began, but this man stood as if the noise and heat meant nothing to him. Varel lifted her chin and called out so the crowd could hear. People of Terran, look upon this human. He comes from a gentle world where storms are soft and mountains are small. He believes he can stand in the trials of strength. Shall we show him the truth? The stands roared with approval. Many laughed, some shouting words meant to shake Raylan's focus. Raylan did not answer them. His gaze remained on the massive beast at Varel's side. Korth's armored plates gleamed under the sun, each one thick enough to turn aside a heavy blade. Its tail, long and barbed, swayed slowly as if it were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Varel stepped forward and gave a sharp whistle. Korth lowered its head, the sound of its growl rumbling deep from its chest. You will see what it means to face a true champion, Varel said. When Korth moves, nothing can stand before him. Your bones will not last a breath. Raylan adjusted the gloves on his hands. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the sand. Strength is not measured by size alone. The crowd reacted with fresh laughter. They were certain he was overconfident. Varel's eyes narrowed, but she only smiled in return. To her, it did not matter what the human believed. Soon, she would prove him wrong before thousands of witnesses. The announcer raised his arm to signal the next round of the match. The flag dropped. Korth surged forward, sent flying from under its claws. The beast moved with surprising speed. For its size, covering the distance between them in seconds. The impact of its steps made the ground tremble. Raylan stepped aside at the last instant, his feet kicking up sand as he moved. Korth's claws missed by inches, carving deep marks into the arena floor. The crowd gasped, but then cheered again. As the beast wheeled around for another charge, Varel's voice rang out. Do not run, human. Face him and see what real power feels like. Korth attacked again, each swing of its limbs filled with raw force. Raylan continued to dodge, his movements precise and controlled. He never wasted energy on needless motion. Every time the beast struck, he learned more about its rhythm. He watched the way the plates on its armor shifted when it turned. He saw how the tail swung in a wide arc after each attack, and how the front claws always touched the ground in the same pattern before a lunge still. The crowd saw only a man avoiding defeat. They called out insults, urging the beast to finish him. Varel herself began to grow impatient. She had expected to end this quickly. Yet the human still stood. You cannot run forever, she called out, her voice sharp. Raylan looked at her for a moment before answering. I do not run. I wait. That answer stirred a ripple of confusion among those listening. Before anyone could question it, Korth charged once more, faster this time. Raylan did not move until the last second, sidestepping so that the beast's claws struck only empty air. As Korth's weight carried it forward, Raylan reached out and touched the side of its armor with a light tap, then stepped back again. The move seemed strange to the crowd. A single touch could do nothing against such a creature. Yet Raylan's eyes shone with a spark of understanding. Varel saw the motion and laughed. That will not even scratch him. You are only delaying your fall. But something in the human's calm unsettled her. She had fought many opponents, and most grew desperate when they could not land a strike. Raylan seemed to be waiting for something only he could see. Korth attacked again, this time striking with its tail. The barbed tip cut through the air, but Raylan bent low and rolled aside, coming to his feet several paces away. The beast let out an angry roar, its breath steaming in the heat. The announcer called for a short pause in the round to reset positions. As the two fighters returned to their marks, the crowd continued to cheer for Varel, though some had begun to watch Raylan more closely. His ability to avoid every attack had planted a small seed of doubt in their minds. During the pause, Varel knelt beside Korth, speaking to it in low tones only it could hear. The beast's breathing slowed as it listened, its muscles tightening with renewed focus. When she rose again, her gaze locked on Raylan, "You have lasted longer than I thought," she said. "But every creature falls when the right force strikes. Remember this as your last moment before defeat." Raylan met her words with silence. His eyes scanned the sand, noting the deep marks left by Korth's claws and the paths it had taken during the fight. He could see where the creature favored its left side, how certain moves required it to shift its weight, and how those moments left gaps in its defense. The horn sounded again, marking the start of the next exchange. Korth leapt forward, leading. With its right claws, Raylan stepped in close instead of moving back. The crowd gasped at his daring move. He struck quickly, his hand finding a narrow gap between two armor plates near the creature's shoulder. The blow was not meant to harm, but to test. He felt the slight give of the joint and stepped away before the tail could strike him. Varel noticed where his strike had landed. Her smile faded, replaced by a flash of unease. She could not understand how the human had found such a weak point so quickly. The crowd's laughter began to fade. They still believed Varel would win. But now they watched with a new kind of attention. The human's movements were too deliberate to be random. Korth growled, its armored plates shifting as it turned for another charge. Raylan stood ready, his eyes locked on the creature's every motion. The heat swirled around them, the sand shifting under their feet, and the noise of the crowd faded into the background. The match was far from over, but already the air between the two fighters had changed. Varel could no longer see him as just a fragile outsider. There was something in the way he stood, something in the patience in his eyes, that warned her this fight would not end the way she expected. The horn echoed again across the grand arena, and the crowd's voices grew louder. The air shimmered from the desert heat, but all eyes were fixed on the two fighters. Raylan stood with the same calm posture as before, his breathing steady. Across from him, Korth pawed at the sand, its claws sinking deep into the golden grains. The massive war beast was restless, its growls rolling through the air like thunder. Varel raised her arm, signaling her command. Korth lowered its head and prepared to charge. The creature's armor plates caught the sunlight, sending sharp flashes of light across the arena walls. The crowd chanted the beast's name, their voices blending into a deep, rhythmic beat. Then Varel gave the order. Korth launched forward like a falling mountain. Each step landed with a heavy thud that shook the ground. The beast's speed was frightening for its size. Its front claws came down in a sweeping arc aimed to crush the human in a single blow. Raylan moved at the last instant, twisting his body so the claws struck only sand. He felt the rush of air as they passed inches from his side. His feet carried him around the beast's flank, but Korth turned with surprising agility, its tail lashing out. The barbed tip cut through the air toward him. Raylan dropped low, the tail passing above his head. He came up just in time to see Korth's hind legs push off the ground for another strike. The crowd erupted, cheering at the speed of the attack. Many expected the human to be overwhelmed at any moment. Yet again, Raylan slipped aside, avoiding the crushing weight of the beast's claws. Sand flew into the air as Korth struck the ground, leaving deep furrows. From the stands, it looked like the human was only running, but those watching more closely noticed something different. Each time Raylan dodged, his eyes tracked the beast's movements with careful attention. He was not fleeing at random. He was reading the creature's rhythm. Varel watched him with a calculating gaze. She could feel that this was no simple avoidance. The human's footwork was deliberate, He kept just enough distance to remain safe, yet close enough to observe the details of Korth's armor. Korth attacked again, this time sweeping both claws across the sand in a wide arc. Raylan stepped backward, letting the claws pass before. He dashed forward toward the beast's side. His hand shot out, striking the edge of an armor plate near its foreleg. The blow was light, but his fingers found the same joint he had touched before. A faint vibration from the strike told him he had found what he was looking for. He stepped away quickly before the tail could strike. The crowd shouted in surprise, but the noise was mixed. Now some were impressed by the human's boldness, others thought it foolish. Korth turned sharply, letting out a roar that echoed off the stone walls. The beast's breath came in short bursts, and its nostrils flared. It lunged again, aiming to crush the human under its full weight. Raylan darted sideways, but this time he did not retreat far. He moved in close, his body low, and placed another precise strike on the beast's armor hinge. Korth stumbled slightly, its foreleg bending in a way that made Varel's eyes narrow. The crowd noticed it too. A murmur spread through the stands. This was the first time anyone had seen the war beast's movement falter. Varel barked a command, and Korth steadied itself. The beast let out an angry growl and charged once more, its pace even faster. Raylan met its rush head-on, then sidestepped. At the last moment, his hand brushed another joint in the armor, this time near the shoulder. He was building a map in his mind, each touch giving him more understanding of the beast's weaknesses. The crowd's mood was changing. The laughter from earlier was gone. Now, every movement of the fighters drew sharp attention. They could see that the human was not just surviving, he was shaping the flow of the battle. Korth swung its tail again, faster than before. Raylan ducked, but this time the tip grazed his shoulder, knocking him slightly off balance. The crowd gasped. Sand stuck to the sweat on his arm, but he regained his footing quickly. Varel's eyes lit with sharp focus. "You are quick," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise. "But you cannot keep this up forever." Raylan's voice was calm as he answered, "Long enough." Those words unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She could feel that he was waiting for something, and she did not yet know what it was. Korth's growls deepened, its claws digging into the sand. It charged again, and Raylan did not move away. He stepped directly toward the beast, slipping under the swing of its claws. His hand struck twice, once at the leg hinge and once at the armor joint on its side. Both strikes were sharp and precise. The beast roared in frustration and spun, but in doing so, its front leg wavered for a fraction of a second. The movement was small, but to Raylan, it was proof. He had found the key to breaking this monster's strength. The announcer's voice rose above the noise, calling for the end of the current exchange. The fighters pulled back to their starting marks. The crowd erupted into mixed shouts, some in support of Varel, others curious about the human's skill. Raylan stood quietly, his breathing still steady. Varel kept her eyes locked on him, trying to read his thoughts. She had faced many warriors, but none like this. He had yet to land a truly damaging blow. Yet the battle already felt different. As the horn sounded for the next round, the tension in the air was thick. The crowd leaned forward, sensing that something was about to change. Korth stamped its claws into the sand, ready to unleash its full power. Raylan shifted his stance, no longer just avoiding attacks, but preparing for his own. The first clash was over, but the real fight was about to begin. The horn's deep note echoed across the grand arena. The sound rolled over the crowd like a wave, and all voices fell silent for a brief moment before the chants began again. Varel stood tall beside her war beast, Korth, her eyes never leaving Raylan. She could feel a strange tension in the air. The crowd's energy was different now. They were still calling for her victory, but their laughter at the human had faded. Many were now watching him with interest. Korth scraped its claws across the sand, each stroke leaving deep furrows. Its breath came in steady bursts, a low growl rumbling from its throat. Raylan stood across the arena, his stance balanced, his gaze fixed on the creature. He was no longer simply avoiding the beast's attacks. His movements had changed. There was a readiness in his posture, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. The flag dropped. Varel gave a sharp command, and Korth charged. The ground shook under the weight of the beast's run. Its armor plates clattered against each other as it closed the distance. Raising its claws high, Raylan moved forward, not back. The crowd gasped at the sight of the smaller fighter running straight toward the massive war beast. At the last moment, he pivoted to the side, his hand striking the hinge in Korth's leg armor with a sharp, focused blow. The sound of metal meeting metal rang out across the arena. Korth roared in pain and swung its tail. But Raylan was already gone, slipping to its other side. Another strike landed, this time on the shoulder joint. The beast staggered for a heartbeat before regaining its footing. Varel's eyes narrowed. She could feel her control slipping. Korth, crush him, she shouted. The beast lunged again, its claws tearing into the sand. Raylan spun away from the blow, his feet moving in smooth, precise steps. Each time he avoided the claws, he countered with another quick strike to the same points he had been targeting since the beginning of the match. The pattern began to show. Korth's once powerful steps grew less certain. Its right foreleg trembled slightly each time it put weight on it. The armor plates around its shoulder were shifting awkwardly, no longer locking as tightly as they should. The crowd noticed. Murmurs spread through the stands. Some leaned forward, trying to see exactly what the human was doing. Others shouted warnings to Varel, their voices mixing with the calls for her to end the fight quickly. Varel pressed her lips together. She could no longer underestimate him. This was not luck. This was skill. The human had found weaknesses in Korth's armor that no other warrior had ever exploited. She knew she needed to finish this before he caused lasting damage. She gave a new command. Korth reared back on its hind legs, then came down with both front claws in a crushing strike aimed directly at Raylan. The impact sent a cloud of sand into the air. The crowd erupted, certain that the human had been caught. But as the sand cleared, Raylan stood just beyond the reach of the claws, his expression unchanged. He had slipped to the side at the last moment, and before Korth could recover, he struck the weakened leg hinge again. This time, the sound was sharper, and the beast's leg buckled slightly under its own weight. Gasps came from the stands. The mighty war beast had stumbled. It had never done that in all its matches. Varel's jaw tightened. She stepped forward, shouting commands to push Korth into a furious assault. The beast obeyed, attacking with rapid strikes, its claws sweeping across the sand in a blur. Raylan was forced to move faster, dodging in tight arcs, his boots leaving swirling patterns in the arena floor. But even under the flurry of attacks, he found his openings. Another strike to the shoulder joint, another to the leg hinge. Each one added to the growing damage. Korth's roars grew louder, but its movements were slowing. The crowd's chants were changing now. Some still called for Varel's victory, but others shouted Raylan's name, drawn to the sight of a smaller fighter challenging the undefeated champion. Varel could feel the pressure building. Her pride refused to accept the idea of losing to a human. Yet she could not deny what she was seeing every time Raylan struck. Her war beast's power diminished slightly. Raylan's breathing was heavier now, sweat shining on his brow under the hot sun. But his eyes stayed sharp. He had studied Korth long enough. He knew that one or two more precise strikes could break the fight open. Korth lunged again, leading with its left claw. Raylan stepped in close, his hands moving in a blur. One strike hit the shoulder joint, forcing the armor to shift awkwardly. The second landed on the damaged leg hinge with full force. A loud crack split the air. The crowd gasped in unison. Korth's leg bent inward, and the beast stumbled forward, barely catching itself on its other limbs. For the first time, Varel looked uncertain. She shouted for Korth to back away, trying to give it room to recover. But the damage was clear. The once unbreakable beast was wounded, and everyone in the arena could see it. Raylan stood in the center of the sand, breathing steadily again, his hands at his sides. He did not press the attack immediately. Instead, he watched, letting the moment sink in. The crowd had fallen into a strange silence, the weight of what had just happened settling over them. The announcer's voice rang out, marking the pause between exchanges. The fighters returned to their marks, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The people of Terran had just witnessed something they thought impossible. As Raylan walked back to his position, he caught Varel's gaze. She no longer looked at him with mockery. There was still challenge in her eyes, but it was now mixed with respect and a trace of something else in ease. The horn would sound again soon. Both fighters knew the next round could decide everything. The pause between rounds was short, but the silence in the arena felt heavier than before. Thousands of eyes were fixed on the fighters. The people of Terran had just seen the impossible. Their undefeated war beast had stumbled, its armor damaged, by the strikes of a human challenger. The air was thick with tension. Varel stood close to Korath, speaking in low tones to calm the beast. She could see the way its right leg shook slightly, and how its movements had lost their perfect balance. Anger burned in her chest. But she forced herself to breathe slowly. She could not afford to let her temper guide her now. Raylan stood at his mark with a steady gaze. Sweat dripped down the side of his face, but his breathing was calm. He knew the fight was turning in his favor. Yet he also understood that a wounded beast could be even more dangerous. Korath still had power, and one wrong move could end the match. The horn's deep note signaled the start of the next round. Varel gave a sharp command, and Korath surged forward. Its run was slightly uneven now, but the force of its charge was still enough to make the sand shake. The crowd roared, their voices echoing through the high walls. Raylan moved in a wide arc to the left, forcing the beast to turn. Korath's claws dug deep into the ground as it pivoted, but the shift in weight made its damaged leg strain. Raylan saw the momentary hesitation and stepped in quickly, striking the weakened hinge with a solid blow. A sharp crack echoed across the arena. Korath roared in pain and swung its tail in a wide arc. Raylan bent low and rolled under it. Coming up near the beast's shoulder, he struck the armor joint there with precision. Feeling the plate shift further out of alignment, the crowd gasped. The mighty war beast had dropped to one knee for a brief moment before pushing itself up again. Varel's voice rang out, filled with urgency. Korath, end this now. The beast lunged, slamming both claws down toward Raylan. He stepped back, letting the claws hit the sand. As they did, the arm around the right leg shifted again, leaving a narrow gap. Raylan's eyes locked on it. This was his chance. He stepped forward with speed, placing all his strength into a single strike at the gap. The sound was like stone breaking. The armor plate split along the hinge, and the leg buckled completely. Korath let out a roar that shook the walls, its body collapsing forward. The crowd erupted in shock. Never in the history of the trials had Korath been brought down like this. The beast struggled to rise, its claws scraping against the sand, but the damaged leg could no longer hold its weight. Raylan stepped back, breathing heavily now. He did not press another attack. Instead, he stood ready, watching for any sign that the beast might try one final desperate strike. Varel's face was pale with disbelief. Her war beast, the pride of her clan, had been made to kneel by a human. She clenched her fists and called for Korath to rise. But the creature could only lift itself halfway before collapsing again. The noise from the stands was unlike anything the arena had heard before. Some shouted in amazement, others in disbelief. The chant of Varel's name was now mixed with voices calling for the human. Raylan's eyes stayed on Korath, but he spoke to Varel. It is over. She shook her head. Korath still stands in spirit. He will fight until the end. But her words were hollow. She could see the truth. The armor was broken, and without it, the leg could not support the beast's weight. Korath let out a low growl, more from frustration than strength. The fight was no longer a contest of power. It had become a test of will. Raylan stepped forward slowly, not in aggression, but in respect. He placed one hand on the beast's shoulder, just above the broken joint. You fought well, he said softly, though only those closest could hear. Korath's breathing slowed. The beast's eyes, once fierce and burning, now seemed to hold a strange recognition. It lowered its head slightly, not in defeat to the human, but in acknowledgement of his strength. The announcer's voice rang out, strong and clear. Korath cannot continue. The match is decided. Victory to Raylan of Earth. The arena exploded with sound. Some cheered wildly, others sat in stunned silence, unable to accept what they had seen. Dust swirled in the sunlight as the banners of the Iron Horn clan lowered in honor of the victor. Raylan stepped back to his mark, standing tall despite his exhaustion. The fight had tested every part of his skill and patience, but he had proven that strength was more than size or power. Varel approached him, her steps slow and heavy. She stopped a few paces away, her eyes meeting his. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice meant for him alone, she said, "You have done what no other has. My respect is yours." Raylan gave a small nod. It was never about defeating you. It was about showing what could be done. Her expression was unreadable, but she gave a single nod in return. Then she turned to lead Korth from the arena, her hand resting on the beast's thick neck. The crowd's voices followed them, still filled with energy from the battle they had witnessed. As Raylan left the arena floor, he could feel the eyes of the people on him. Some still doubted, others admired, but all would remember this day. The human who had been called fragile had broken the undefeated war beast. The breaking point had come, and the legend had begun. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the great arena. The golden light made the broken sand and scattered bits of armor shine faintly. The roar of the crowd had faded, replaced by the quieter sound of people leaving, their voices still full of the memory of what they had witnessed. Raylan stood in a small preparation room under the arena. His armor was scratched, his arms ached, and his legs felt heavy, but his eyes were steady. He had won the fight, yet his mind was still replaying every move, every risk, and every strike that had brought him to victory. A young attendant entered, with a bowl of water and a cloth. "Sir, your wounds," the attendant said quietly. Raylan shook his head. Later, "Tell me, how's the beast?" The attendant looked surprised but answered, "Korth is alive. The healers are working on his leg. He will walk again, though perhaps not fight as before." Raylan gave a short nod, relief flickering in his eyes. He had never wanted to destroy Korth, only to prove himself. Above the arena floor, Varel stood beside the healers. Korth lay stretched, out on thick mats, his sides rising and falling slowly. His damaged armor had been removed, revealing the deep bruises beneath. Varel's hand rested on his neck as she whispered to him in her own tongue. "Q." The beast gave a low rumble in reply. For the first time in years, Varel felt something she could not easily name. It was not shame and not anger, though both were mixed somewhere inside her. It was the recognition that strength could exist in a form she had never respected. The human had faced her greatest weapon and not only survived but triumphed. The Iron Horn elders approached her. Their expressions were serious. "You brought this human to the arena. You laughed at him before the people. Now he has shown us something rare. What do you think of him now?" Varel straightened her shoulders. "I think he is worthy of respect, and I think he has changed what our people believe about his kind." The eldest nodded slowly. "Perhaps we will watch him closely." Later that evening, as the arena grounds grew quiet, Raylan was summoned to the main hall of the Iron Horn clan. The wide stone room was lined with banners showing past victories, each telling the story of a champion or a great beast. In the center, a long table was set, though no food had been served yet. Varel was already there, standing at the far end of the room. She was dressed not in her battle armor, but in the formal robes of her clan. The sight was strange to Raylan, who had only seen her as a fighter. "You came," she said simply. "I was called," Raylan replied. His voice was calm, but his eyes were alert. She walked toward him, her steps measured. "I want to understand. You fought with precision, not just strength. You knew where to strike, when to wait, and when to take the risk. Was that skill learned on your world?" Raylan nodded. "On Earth, most battles are not about size. We do not have beasts like Korth, so we learn to use our minds as much as our bodies. We study patterns. We adapt." Varel studied him for a long moment. "When I first saw you, I thought you were fragile. I believed one blow from Korth would end the fight. Now I see you are not fragile. You are different. That difference is why I came here," Raylan said. I wanted your people to see that humans are more than they believe. They stood in silence for a while. Finally, Varel gestured for him to sit at the table. The elders entered, taking their places. The air in the hall grew heavy with formality. An elder spoke. Raylan of Earth, you have defeated our greatest champion beast. In doing so, you have brought honor to your own name and surprise to ours. You are welcome to stay among us for the time you wish. Another elder added, but understand, some will not accept you. They will think the fight was luck. Others will fear what it means. Raylan met their eyes. I did not expect all to believe, but truth spreads. What was seen today cannot be unseen. Varel could see the confidence in his words, not as arrogance, but as something deeper. She realized then that his victory was not only for himself. It was for every human who would come after him. When the meeting ended, Varel walked with him to the outer gates. The air outside was cooler now, and the stars were beginning to appear. You should know, she said, there will be challenges. Others may try to face you, to take back what they see as pride lost. I welcome it, Raylan said. Every fight is another chance to show what is possible. They stopped at the gate. The guards watched silently. I will still train Korth, Varel said. One day, perhaps you will face him again. I would be honored, Raylan replied. Varel gave the smallest hint of a smile. Until then, human. Raylan left the gates and made his way through the winding streets toward the guest quarters. The city felt different now. People who had ignored him before now turned to look. Some whispered, some nodded in respect, and others simply stared. The story of the fight was spreading quickly. In a small home nearby, a young boy told his father he wanted to fight like the human. In the marketplace, a group of traders discussed whether humans might be more valuable allies than they had thought. Change was beginning, slow but steady. That night, Raylan sat on the balcony of his quarters, looking up at the stars. Somewhere among them was Earth, his home. He wondered if his people would ever know the impact of what had happened here. He knew this was only the beginning. And far away, in her own chamber, Varel sat beside Korth. She thought of the way the human had spoken to the beast in the arena. She thought of the calm in his eyes, even when facing danger. For the first time, she considered what it might mean to fight alongside a human instead of against one. The wind moved through the open window, carrying the faint sound of the city below. Both warrior and challenger rested that night with the same thought in their minds. The real test was yet to come. The next morning, the city woke to a sky filled with dark clouds. They rolled in from the north, heavy and low, as if carrying some unseen weight. The Iron Horn clan had known storms before, but this was different. The air felt tense, the wind sharp, and the animals in the stables shifted restlessly. Raylan was in the training yard when a horn sounded from the watchtower. The sound was not the call for sport or ceremony. It was the signal for danger. He dropped the wooden staff he had been using and ran toward the nearest gate from the high walls. He saw movement in the distance. A column of shapes advanced slowly across the open plain. They were not from the Iron Horn clan. They were the Black Fang Raiders, known for their sudden attacks and merciless raids. The stories said they fought with machines built for destruction and cared nothing for honor. Varel arrived on the wall beside him, her battle armor already in place. They have not attacked our city for many years, she said. If they are here now, it means they think we are weak. Raylan kept his eyes on the approaching force. Then we show them they are wrong. The elders quickly gathered the warriors in the main square. Orders were given, defenses set. The great gates were reinforced, and the archers took their positions. On the walls, Korth, still recovering from the fight, was brought forward. He moved slowly, but his eyes burned with determination. Varel approached Raylan. You fought Korth and won. Now I ask you to fight with us. You know tactics my people do not. We will need them. Raylan nodded. Then we planned together. They studied the map of the city and the surrounding land. Raylan pointed to a narrow path near the cliffs. If we can leave their machines there, the ground will work against them. Their size will become a weakness. Varel understood quickly. We will use speed to guide them. Strike, then retreat toward the cliffs, forcing them to follow. The plan was set. When the Black Fang Raiders reached the outer edge of the city, they found the Iron Horn warriors ready. Arrows flew from the walls, striking the front ranks. Raylan and Virel led a small group out of the main gate, striking fast and retreating just as the raiders pushed forward. The raiders took the bait. Their heavy machines, spiked and plated with dark metal, rumbled after the retreating fighters. Dust rose in thick clouds behind them. The chase led them toward the cliffs, exactly as planned. At the narrow pass, Raylan signaled the waiting archers hidden in the rocks above. A rain of heavy stones and fire fell upon the raiders, breaking their formation. One of their machines slipped on the uneven ground and crashed into another, sending both tumbling into the gorge below. Still, the fight was far from over. On the main battlefield near the city gates, the raiders pressed hard. Korath, moving slower than before, charged into their ranks, scattering foot soldiers and breaking their lines. His roar shook the air. Virel fought beside Raylan, her blade. Moving with precision, he covered her from the flanks, striking down raiders who tried to surround them. The Iron Horn warriors, seeing their leaders side by side, found renewed strength. The battle lasted until the sun broke through the clouds, when the raiders finally began to retreat. Leaving their fallen behind, the city stood victorious. The cost had been high, but the walls were still standing, and the people still stood together. On the field, Raylan leaned on his weapon, breathing hard. Virel approached, her armor marked with dust and scratches. "You fought well," she said. "So, did you?" Raylan replied. "So did all of us." She looked toward the cliffs where the broken machines still smoked. "Your plan saved many lives today. It worked because you trusted me," Raylan said. "That trust is worth more than any weapon." For the first time, Virel gave him a full smile. "Perhaps our people and yours have more in common than I thought." The elders later called an assembly in the square. The people gathered to hear the news of victory. An elder spoke loudly so all could hear. "Today, the Iron Horn clan stood against the Black Fang Raiders. We did not stand alone. A human fought beside us, and his skill turned the tide. Let all here know that strength is not bound to one world or one form." The crowd cheered, their voices carrying high into the air. Children looked at Raylan with wide eyes, some raising wooden sticks like swords in imitation. That night, the city held a feast. Long tables were filled with food and drink, and songs were sung of the day's battle. Raylan sat near the fire, speaking with warriors who only days before had doubted him. Korath rested nearby, his head low, but his eyes watching the celebration. With quiet pride, Virel joined Raylan at the fire. "The raiders will return one day," she said. "Then we will be ready," Raylan replied. She studied him for a moment. "You could leave now, go back to your world, carry this victory with you, but I think you will stay." Raylan looked into the fire. "There is still work to do here, more to learn, more to prove. Not for me, but for what comes after." Virel nodded. "Then we stand together." Above them, the night sky stretched wide and clear. Somewhere far beyond those stars was Earth, and somewhere here among the Iron Horn clan was a new chapter for both their peoples. The battle had ended, but the story was far from over. And in the hearts of those who had seen the human fight, a simple truth had taken root. Strength was not only in the size of the warrior, but in the will that drove them to stand.